Good evening. This is the Cybersecurity Risk Assessment Report for the United Kingdom for project number 2, Nations Behaving Badly. This slide here is just to give the agenda for tonight's presentation. We'll give an overview. We'll talk about our current measures, the threats to those current measures. We'll discuss the weaknesses in our organization. We'll discuss the attack vectors, which will feature the attribution analysis and the vulnerability matrix. And then we'll close the presentation with risk management, mitigations, and recommendations for the United Kingdom here at the 5E Summit. Okay, so here's a brief overview. We're going to discuss research industries' best practices for authentication, authorization, and access control. We'll continue to research countermeasures and cyber offensive strategies that may be available. And finally, we're going to make recommendations to prevent intrusion attacks at future 5E summits. We will now discuss the current measures for authentication, authorization, and access control methods. With the growth and adoption of smartphones with Touch ID and Face ID features, and the availability of easy-to-carry hardware security tokens such as UTF keys and specifications such as web authentication, we believe now is the perfect time to prioritize passwordless authentication. We have also implemented federated login and single sign-on. Single sign-on allows the user to log into multiple applications with a single set of credentials. Federated login allows users to authenticate with identities attested by third parties. Finally, we will look to improve hardening authentication. Hardened authentication functionality is an essential part of properly implementing your authentication flows. This includes implementing a secure account recovery process. An insecure account recovery process can be exploited to bypass the authentication process. The account recovery process should be protected with a second factor authentication step. The final step of hardening authentication is implementing mutual authentication. Mutual authentication involves authenticating both the connecting parties, which is the client and the server, and is best suited for API authentication and machine-to-machine authentication. For authorization, we will look to use policy as code, implement a zero-trust architecture, and ensure token validations for 5E users. The use of policies as code is a method of defining and managing security rules, criteria, and conditions through code. Policy as a code is a scripted readable file that provides preconditions for testing a given application. What are the benefits of policy as a code? 1. It speeds up security testing. With automated policy enforcement, security testing can be triggered without manual intervention and only when needed. 2. It increases efficiency. By removing manual policy enforcement from the equation, policies can be updated, shared dynamically, removing unnecessary human elements that slow the process down. And finally, it minimizes mistakes and enables validation. With automated policies in place, errors caused by human involvement are avoided. When policies are written in code, it is easy to run validation activities and ensure accuracy. Next, we've looked to implement a zero-trust architecture. A zero-trust architecture is designed to protect modern environments and enable digital transformation by using strong authentication methods, leveraging network segmentation, preventing lateral movement, providing layer 7 threat prevention, and simplifying granular least access policies. Zero Trust architecture gives us the supreme confidence in achieving higher overall levels of security. The first step is to identify the network's most critical and valuable data, assets, applications, and services. By identifying the most critical assets, the United Kingdom can focus in on efforts prioritizing and protecting these assets. It is important to understand users and determine what applications they are using to enforce policies that ensure secure access of critical access. The last measure for authorization is ensuring token validations for FIVE users. Security tokens are a trusted device used to access an electronically restricted resource. It can be seen as an electronic key that enables a user to authenticate and prove his or her identity by storing some sort of personal information. The purpose of a token is to generate a one-time password which will then be validated by the server. We believe that with the implementation of hardware tokens and software tokens will give an extra layer of protection while attending the World Economic Summit. We believe that the tokens will give all FIVE members a better user experience. We believe that it will be cost effective for all participating nations, and we believe that all of our security measures will be up to date. We will now discuss the current measures for access control methods. Role-based access control restricts network access based on a person's role within an organization and has become one of the main methods for advanced access control. It is important to note that access can and should be granted on a need-to-know basis. Security is more easily maintained by limiting unnecessary access to sensitive information based on each user's established role within the organization. And finally, role-based access control maximizes operational efficiency. Multi-factor authentication is a layered approach to securing data and applications where a system requires a user to present a combination of 2 or more credentials to verify a user's identity for login. Multi-factor authentication increases security because even if one credential becomes compromised, unauthorized users will be unable to meet the second authentication requirement and will not be able to access the targeted physical space, devices, network, or database. We will now discuss the threats to current measures in authentication, authorization, and access control methods. For authentication, you have the SQL injection, which is a common attack vector that uses malicious code for backend database manipulation to access information that is sensitive. Then you also have the HTTP basic authentication, which is generally not secure. This is a result of when a client receives an authentication token from the server, which is constructed by creating a username and password and then encoding it in base 64. It is also vulnerable to session-related exploits. Then you have the flawed brute force protection, which is a result of failing to lock an account of an attacker who is trying to access if they attempt too many failed login attempts, as well as failing to block remote users' IP addresses after too many login attempts. For authorization, you have token mismanagement, which is the process in which an attacker might be able to gain unauthorized access to the application and perform certain actions. You also have unprotected resources, which is the result of missing or misconfigured authorization checks in web applications. Attackers also have access to web traffic logs. You have misconfigured access policies. This is where security settings are not adequately defined in the configuration process or maintained and deployed in default settings. This is a result of lack of audits and overlooked essential security settings. And finally, we have broken access control, which is a security flaw that allows an unauthorized user to access restricted resources. Attacks can circumvent standard security procedures and gain unauthorized access to sensitive information or systems, which leads to weak authentication. We will now discuss the three main components that have exposed the weaknesses in our organization's security, starting with people. And I have untrained employees and human error and insider threats, which I believe both can go hand in hand. According to CISA, insider threats present a complex and dynamic risk of affecting the public and private domains of all critical infrastructure sectors. It is important to note that insiders have access and knowledge of the organization's resources. The next component is technology and unsecure networks. If the network isn't secure and you log into an unencrypted site, other users on the network can see what you see and hijack your session and log in as you. This can lead to malware, misconfigured firewalls, and social engineering attacks. Next, we have lack of monitoring. Insufficient login and monitoring, coupled with missing or ineffective integration with the incident response, allows attackers to attack systems further, maintain persistence, tamper, and extract or destroy sensitive data. Outdated systems is the result of not updating your operating systems, not installing antivirus software, requires software updates. Those things lead to vulnerabilities to your infrastructure. And finally, we have policies. Not having a high-level strategy in place can lead to exploitation attacks, such as denial of service and data exfiltration. With our nation state suffering an intrusion attack, it was important for our team to identify attack vectors. An attack vector is a path or means by which an attacker or hacker can gain access to a computer or network server in order to deliver a payload malicious outcome. Attack vectors enable hackers to exploit system vulnerabilities, including the human element. And I've listed some attack vectors that have affected our nation state. We have compromised and weak credentials, misconfigurations, missing or weak encryptions, ransomware, phishing, and last but not least, insider threats. Now that we have identified the attack vectors, we have now conducted an attribution analysis. Cyber attribution is the process of tracking and identifying the perpetrator of a cyber attack or other hacking exploit, which enables organizations to gain a complete picture of an attack and enhance their cybersecurity strategy for the future. There are many databases and programs that can be used for attribution detection, like IP2Nation or Alien Vault Open Threat Exchange. We will now discuss the findings and analysis from the attribution report. Data was presented to all member nations of the Five Eyes Alliance. The data consists of 14 IP addresses collected on May 13, 2017 at 11:25. All 14 IP addresses are suspected to be the IP addresses of bad actors who have committed anomalous behavior. This slide shows a table of those addresses and their suspected origin countries, and these are the results founded by the UK Cybersecurity team. It was discovered the countries performing the anomalous behaviors are the United States, Venezuela, China, Germany, Russia, and New Zealand. 2 members of the Five Eyes Alliance were discovered to be on the list, which were the United States of America and New Zealand. The Vulnerability Assessment Matrix is a tool used by the UK Cybersecurity team to help identify, assess, and prioritize the risk posed by potential threats to our organization. The Vulnerability Assessment Matrix indicates 10 additional attack vectors that is currently affecting our nation state. Each vulnerability is categorized by its CVE, which stands for Common Vulnerabilities and Exposures. CVE is a glossary that classifies vulnerabilities. The glossary analyzes vulnerabilities and then uses the Common Vulnerability Scoring System to evaluate the threat level of a vulnerability. A CVE score is often used for prioritizing the security of vulnerabilities. As you can see, we have a column that indicates the impact of each vulnerability. We have some that are critical, medium, and high, but you can also have an impact that is low. Our team will follow the risk management guidance set by the National Cybersecurity Center, which is based in the United Kingdom. The purpose of this guidance is to give you a range of risk management techniques which will help you improve the decisions you make with regard to cybersecurity. Some of the things that the risk management guidance will help us achieve will be to manage user privileges. It will help us establish strong incident response reports and disaster recovery capabilities. It would also help us establish a monitoring strategy and produce supporting policies. Here are some mitigation strategies that we have separated into 3 categories. The first category is people. All 5E members that represent the United Kingdom must be properly trained to recognize intrusion attacks and to be able to utilize intrusion detection systems. For technology, the United Kingdom will constantly monitor all network traffic. This includes the implementation of firewalls and antivirus software. For policy, cybersecurity risk assessments will be conducted regularly, and we will also implement network access controls. Here are our recommendations going forward. Ensuring that 5E members are properly trained. As stated before, human error, whether directly or indirectly, can lead to insider threats. We want to make sure that all members of the United Kingdom are properly trained. That includes using scanning tools, IDS tools. We want to make sure that we have the best people representing the United Kingdom. Next, we have actively manage systems and configuration. Configuration management is all about preventing issues so you don't have to deal with the problems later. We want to make sure that we test any scanning tools or any production that comes out of the United Kingdom. We want to make sure that those things are properly tested and ready to go whenever they're ready to be utilized. It's all about being prepared. We don't want to have a situation like we've experienced now. So, actively managing our systems and configuration is a top priority, which leads to updating and upgrading all software. We're going to make sure that everything is up to date. We don't want any outdated systems coming out of our nation state, which will lead to implementing signed software execution policies, which means any software that we use that is under the United Kingdom's umbrella will have to be approved going forward. We feel that is a method that is important, and we feel that it will give us a sense of security going forward. And finally, we want to create a disaster recovery plan. We want to make sure that we document our risks. We want to specify which data, technologies, and tools are most critical. We want to maintain an inventory of physical assets. And we also want to determine where and how critical business information will be backed up. We want to be prepared for anything going forward as we participate in the 5E Summit and as we collaborate with our allies. So these are our recommendations going forward. They not only apply to the United Kingdom, but they also can apply to our allies. We thank you for taking this time to see our presentation. We hope that this presentation will give us an extra layer of security going forward. Thank you for your time.